Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
And welcome back to the show. It is, has Nazareth ever been played on CL before? And this is the first, I'm sure. That's not part of the smooth and easy catalog, but it works perfectly for our purposes. And yes, we're talking about the breakup of families and relationships. We have David Halkett here from McQuarrieHunterLLP and Leah Donaldson in the Family Law Division. Now, we talked about, spouses breaking up, common law, sort of the prenuptial sort of aspect to it, why people come to see you, when they come to see you. But probably the most serious part of a family breaking up is when you have kids, right?
Yeah, they're the hardest to deal with.
And so is that something that stops people from coming to see you? They say, I wanted to come and see you years ago, but I have kids. Do you get that often?
Yeah, we have a lot of people say that they think being together is better for the children. And I mean, in some cases, I'm sure that's true. People know their families well, but I would also say that children can sense sort of negative energy in a home. So it's not necessarily the best thing.
Yeah, it's a tough one because I never want to counsel anyone to separate. But when someone's mentioned that, I say, well, the children might be better off if both of you are happy and in separate homes than being in one home and both being miserable. Mm-hmm. Because as Leah said, the kids can sense when something's not going well.
Well, having lived this as a kid, it wasn't so much that the parents weren't together, is that they weren't close by.
Yeah.
So I think that, I had a friend who went through this, and I said, the fact that you're there and the fact that you'll be there when they need you and the fact you're going to see them half the time is comfort to them. Like they just need to phone you or whatever, and you're going to see them, right? Mm-hmm. But if you moved away, one parent away from the other, then that's when the kids are really upset about it.
Yeah, and I've even noticed it just on some of my son's teams in the past where they've had two sets of divorced parents. One set wouldn't talk to each other at all, and the kids seem to be having more difficulty with it than the ones who the parents were getting along, at least with respect to them, because no breakup's ever good. Mm-hmm. When they say it's amicable, it's as amicable as it can be. If it was truly amicable, you'd still be together. But at least if you can get along for the children, that takes away at least half the hassle in all the matters. Because I'd swear that my files that have the most cost are the ones where there's working out arrangements to pick up the children, drop them off, etc. It costs a lot of money, and often the fight doesn't seem to be worth it in the end.
Have you any sort of opinion on ages of children? And when you think it's better? Some people wait until they're, 12, 13, 14. And for me, I think that's a real sort of time of your life when you're going through a lot of changes and you need your parents there. Maybe when you're younger and they're little, that might be easier.
Yeah, it's tough because I think that there's different issues that arise. When the children are really young and if they separated, they've never known any different. Mm-hmm. They've always known their parents being apart. So they grow up and get used to it. When the parents have been together for 10, 11 years and the kids, that's all they've known, when all of a sudden they're apart, it's a big change. It's a tough time in life anyway, trying to figure out where you fit in. But I've also had sometimes it seems to be hard on the children when the children are like 18, 19, and 20. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, why did my parents have to get divorced at this point? And they don't, they're going to university, they're doing this, and now they have to fight over who's paying for them for university where they never thought that would be a problem. I don't think there's ever a good time, but when the children are younger and they're used to it all along, it's maybe easier on the children, but the parents fight more of where the children should be. It's never easy, I don't think.
No.
Now, Leah, you mentioned you had a client come in and talk about how much they would have to pay for spousal support and how much they'd have to pay for child support, and it can add up to be a big number. So how is that determined in the eyes of the law? Is it just a straight formula?
So for child support, there's federal child support guidelines, and it's pretty straightforward. It's just one party's income, and the other factor is if the child is shared or not. So how much time the child spends with each parent. So if you're talking about the sort of more old-fashioned model of sort of only every second weekend, then that payor parent is going to simply input their income and the amount of children, and the guidelines tell them exactly what they should be paying. There's always some exceptions in, sort of unique circumstances, but generally 95% of the time it's just straight on the guidelines.
Now, are these numbers, the calculation, updated very often?
Yeah, they've for the child support guidelines, it came in 97. I think they were updated again in 06 and in 2011. So we'll probably be due for a new one coming up soon. They vary province to province depending on where the payor resides. So you pay a little less sometimes in Alberta than you would here, depending on tax rates and cost of living. But yeah, as Leah said, once you can peg what the person's income and how many children, it's pretty straightforward to go from there.
So does the law, do you think, look at the children's well-being is more important than the person paying's ability to live after they've paid out that big amount every month?
Well,
because there might be not much left, right?
Certainly the payers see it that way.
Yeah.
I think the law wants the children to have as little effect as a result of the breakup as they can. So they don't want to go from one home where say they're with the dad who makes more money, and then go and stay with the mom, and all of a sudden they're in poverty with the mom because the dad's not equalizing the income to some extent. So it's based so the children can have as similar lifestyles as they were used to before the separation.
So you have any stories about parents that come in and they're paying the money, but they're unhappy about the way their ex is spending the money?
Absolutely. Most people, I would say, are unhappy about how the ex is spending it. But what I try to sort of explain is that there's a cost to having an extra room in your home. So that person's paying more rent, they're paying more hydro, they're paying more groceries. That the month day-to-day expenses, that people are paying, they're higher as a result of having a child. And as we said, the guidelines don't leave a lot of room for discretion. There's certain circumstances that arise. But overall, I mean, a party has to recognize that parent that's shouldering the majority of the costs, that is increased as a result of having that child in their home the majority of the time.
But you could say, well, my kid comes to see me when it's my turn to get the child, and there are holes in their runners. Why isn't this money going to buy them new Nikes?
Well, as I explain, is that the money goes into the pot at the other home, and it assists in the overall standard of living for the home. Yes, the times I've got thought all the time, he comes in dirty clothes, they're old, I got to buy him new. As I tell the payor that when you pay your base maintenance, your table maintenance, you don't necessarily have to buy the extras because that's what the maintenance is for. When you've paid your $500, $600, $700 a month to the other parent, it's not up to you to then go and spend extras above and beyond if you don't want to. And
people want to do what's right for their kids.
Exactly.
Right?
So if they want to go out and buy them a new pair of Kyrie Irving shoes or something, that's up to them. They can't force the other person to say, I'm giving you $700. I want to see you break down how that's spent on the child.
Because a lot of people would like to see that, I'm sure.
Oh, a lot would, but we have to nip that one in the bud quickly.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, you might have issues with it, but you have to pay thousands of dollars to have a judge review those expenses. If you're really seeking an order like that in court, I mean, I don't know that you would even get the order, and also it would be very expensive.
It would cost you a lot of money, and I agree with Leah. I don't think you'd ever get something like that.
So do you believe that these tables, you said the last time they were updated was 2011, do you think it is enough? So if you're on the other end, if you're the person that's receiving the child support, do you think that the tables give enough money to raise a child in 2017?
That's a hard one. It's very political. I think that they're fair in an overall sense. They take into account both families. And sometimes I think it's harder on the lower income you have and the more children. Like I had a case where a guy made like $40,000, and this was on the 1997 tables, and he had to pay out $750, $800 a month in base maintenance out of $40,000. It was. It's a really big hit. So it can be tough on that one. But at the other hand, the other person didn't have an income. She was on social assistance, and at the time they deducted every dollar that she received from the social assistance. So in the end, he still had more money left over than what the recipient did. So I think the government's tried to strike as fair a balance as you can.
What's the biggest number you've ever seen for child support every month? Do you know? Like or
you mean in a personal case, or
like a biggest number for, say, a spousal and child support a month?
I was reading case law the other day. This isn't a personal case, but we see numbers as high as $20,000 if people are making millions of dollars a year. But I mean, the general case is, sometimes $2,000-$3,000.
Yeah, depending on the income and how long they've been together and how many children. I've seen upwards 5 to 8 depending on my personal cases, but I know there's been some child maintenance, where it's been $15,000 for child maintenance alone. Plus
they're going to
spousal.
University or something like
No,
that?
they just were
The income
people
is so
that lived
high.
in West Van, and I think he was a doctor who made like $2 million a year, so he was paying a lot overall. There's a question when it gets very high as to whether or not that's really a transfer of assets rather than what the child needs. But the courts tend to take the position that they lived that lifestyle while they were together, so they should continue to have the similar lifestyle afterwards.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're talking about family law on CL 650. From Macquarie LLP, we have David Halkett and Leah Donaldson in studio, and we'll continue our conversation next.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.